Hey folks, Steve here. Just going to talk through assessment three. Um, there's been a little confusion for some of you, um, which I'm going to try and address. So if you are confused at all about the assessment, you have any questions, please let me know, and I can do more of these tutorials working through it if they're required. Okay, the main point is you have to get 2 films from the course, right? These are films that you can say you did a presentation on one of the films, you still do that film, or if a film that you picked for assessment 1, you can do that film again. Okay, so that's the first thing. Okay, you get 2 films from the course, and basically it's talking about them individually but also together. And the whole idea is using Thomas Litch's modes. These are the modes that we've looked at across the course. We're talking about them every week, so you should be familiar with them by now. They're part of the presentation criteria. Also, very briefly, they're the adjustment, which is changes, alters, illusion, analogy, celebration, colonization, deconstruction, imitation, parody, pastiche, revision, and secondary. I'm not going to explain what each one is here because you can look at that yourself. Look at the cheat sheet, which is on, I think it's in the assessments tab on Canvas, which sort of gives you a breakdown of each mode. Also, for a more detailed description of each mode, look at Thomas Leach's chapter, which is also available at the same spot where you'll find the cheat sheet. Okay, so here is an example of how I would do it. Okay, now I think the Venn diagram could play a good sort of role in this. So basically get 2 films. Now, for the purpose of this, I've just chosen 2 films which have a lot in comparison, and that's Ghost World and American Splendor. And what you want to do is write each film in each circle, and then, this is very brief. Obviously, you would want to sort of detail this more, but you start to think of what's different about them and what's similar about them, and also, really work this through the modes. Now, obviously, both are comic book adaptations, so there's a lot to say there. Crumb, the illustrator, although he's neither film is about him, he actually appears in both films in particular ways. Okay, the main thing about both of these adaptations, which is interesting, is that the source's author is involved in the adaptation, whether it's Harvey Pekar, who appears as a character in the film playing himself, or whether it's Daniel Clowes in Ghost World, where he is a co-writer of the screenplay. And I think there's a lot of interest and comparison to talk about each of those, especially with American Splendor, where Harvey Pekar is a character, but he wasn't involved in the writing of the script or anything like that. In fact, as he jokes in the film, he actually wanted very little to do with the film. Then both are indie and cult films, which again is worth having a chat about. Now, the modes, which I think work within both films, which you could discuss, would be the adjustment mode, and this is the one that alters the source without losing the sentiment, right? Because I think both are doing that. They're not, they're very faithful to the mode. Illusion directly alludes to many different cultural contexts. Both, they're working within the comic book context, comic book genre. Comic stores appear in both films. Both central characters are drawers. They're comic drawers. So there's a lot to talk about in regard to the comic sort of culture and things like that with the central character. Celebration. They're both celebrating the source work. They both have a love for the source work. They're using direct lines and just shot setups from from the sources that they're adapting. And I would say also they're kind of secondary in these are the adaptations which are part of broader cycles, and they're kind of part of this comic book kind of indie comic book adaptation, which you could talk about more. Now, what they have in separation is some of the modes would be the revision mode for Ghost World, which I don't think is really at work in American Splendor. Revision is the one that alters the meaning, and we kind of discussed this when, Ghost World sort of starts in a particular way, which is very faithful to the comic, but then it does sort of become, quite a conventional, story, which follows very much a Hollywood, Hollywood narrative, and I think it's worth discussing Ghost World through that way. I don't think American Splendor is really revision like that. American Splendor seems more faithful to actually what's going on in the comic. It is a deconstruction. American Splendor in a deconstruction is an adaptation that is essentially asking questions about its own adaptation process. And you've got, you've actually got characters in American Splendor talking to the camera, sort of talking about it being an adaptation. You don't have that in Ghost World. Ghost World it fleshes out different characters. Seymour becomes a different character. It does alter the meaning with Seymour. He's not just a character to laugh at. Suddenly he becomes a character to really empathise with, things like that. So these are the kinds of things I want you to really talk to in this assessment. Okay, have some fun with it. Really take it wherever you want to take it, and also the point of comparison could be really interesting. Just comparing like two films which don't seem to belong with each other. What all of the films of the course have is they are adaptations, so that's worth having a chat about. Okay, now in addition to discussing and analysing your adaptation of choice, you are asked to consider what aspects such as point of view, setting, location, themes, as discussed in the leading class tutorial, play in establishing the adaptation through lectures modes. Okay, so you might want to think about with American Splendor and Ghost World, location and how particular real locations that actually appear in the comic are also used in the film. That could also be really interesting. Think about the point of view. Does the point of view shift? Does it change? Ghost World is interesting in that they do kind of open up the point of view a bit more than what you see in the comic. So these are things worth discussing as well. And just finally, although you are welcome to write this assignment in the traditional form of an essay, you are free to submit this as a recorded PowerPoint in a way that I'm demonstrating right now, even though I'm sure you'll be able to demonstrate it with more competency and finesse when it comes to the video essay. I'm clearly, not much of an expert when it comes to the video essay, but I'm sure you are. So just have a think about that, and just discuss your ideas and options with your tutor. And like I said, you can use films that you've previously written and discussed through assessments. Okay, assessment criteria. This is all on Canvas, ladies and gentlemen. Ability to demonstrate originality of thought, ability to demonstrate knowledge of Thomas Leitch's modes, ability to identify how aspects such as point of view, setting, location, themes play in establishing the adaptation through those modes, ability to use examples. Use examples. You have to use examples to support the points that you are making, okay, and the professional standards as well. Okay, so that is the assessment, the 10 modes assessment. You don't have to talk about every mode. You might just want to talk about one mode. You might want to talk about 5. You might want to talk about all 10. It's really up to you. It's really about the depth and the detail that you talk about those modes. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening, and I hope that clarifies anything for people that needed some clarification. And if you're requiring more clarification, please email me or just ask me directly for some clarification for all things to do with Textual Crossings. All right, I'll leave it there. Bye for now.